It's February 28th. We're going to learn something. John Keats was an 18th century poet. No, he wasn't an 18th century poet. He was a 19th century poet. He was born in the 18th century. What am I doing? He is best known for having rather sensual poetry. He focuses on beauty and love. A lot of it's morbid. He talks about death. Apparently there was this whole little thing where someone's parents didn't want someone to get married, so we were this close to not getting John Keats, man. That was a close one. I would tell you the day he was born, but I'm not sure if he would agree. He would say it was October 29th, 1795. His birth certificate reads October 31st, 1795. He didn't like celebrating his birthday. John was the oldest of 5 kids. His younger siblings were George, Tom, Edward, and Francis. Youngest was a girl. Edward died as a little baby when John was 6. That was sort of the start of a lot of other people dying around John. John's parents didn't have a lot of money. They wanted John to go to a really good school. They ended up sending them all to Clark School. Now, when you think poet, you think that quiet person in the back of the room. That wasn't John while he was at Clark School. He started fights. He liked getting into fights. People knew him for getting into fights. Pugnacious was the word for him. Joining in on the fights were his brothers, George and Tom, who he had a very strong bond with, a bond that lasted while they were all alive, and his BFF, Charles Cowden Clark, whose father was the headmaster of the school. But a year after being admitted into that school, a tragedy struck. When John was 8, his father died. 2 months after John's father's death, his mother automatically remarried to a banker whose last name was Rawlings. That was a bad idea. He sold off her property, took a lot of money, and there was a mutual poof, and they went their separate ways. Suddenly struck with financial instability, John's mom took the kids, and they went to live with Grandma. That didn't last so long for his mom, though, because his mom suddenly up and decided that she was going to vanish for 3.5 years. Following his mom going poof, John began to suffer from chronic anxiety, and he was a bit of a hypochondriac, and these two things were something that would follow him throughout his entire life. But at school, it was business as usual, getting into fights, hanging out with his brothers. Then suddenly, after 3.5 years, his mom came back. His mom was sick. John nursed her throughout the remaining year of her life. It was during the time when John was nursing his sick mother that he really started to get into literature. In fact, he won an award of sorts in school. And then she died. Tuberculosis got her. Not cool, tuberculosis. So you have to wonder what effect that would have on an 11, 12-year-old mind. Your mom being gone all this time, then she comes back, then a year later, she dies. Following John's mother's death, John's grandmother turned control of the family finances over to Richard Abbey. Richard Abbey eventually became the Keats children's guardian after their grandmother died. Richard Abbey was quite stingy with their money, and he often lied about their money, and he generally didn't like the Keats children at all. It didn't mean he did not want them to be successful in life. Richard Abbey pulled John out of Clark School and had him apprenticed under a surgeon/apothecary. I said it right. You can imagine John was surprised by this, but he managed to get through it, especially with the help of his BFF, Charles Cowden Clark, who helped him study. After 4 years as an apprentice, John started to attend medical school. John's BFF would go on to describe this time as the most placid time of John's life. Charles Cowden Clark. I brought him up twice. He had a big impact on John's life, not just because he was his BFF, but because he introduced John to poetry, specifically Spenser's Faerie Queene. He read it, and it was just, oh my God, poetry. And that little mind explosion is what got John hooked on writing poetry. In fact, one of his first works of poetry was an imitation of Spenser. That's what it was, and that was its name. But ever since that moment, Charles introduced John to the wonderful, sensual, erotic world of poetry. Poetry began to dominate all of John's waking thoughts during medical school. In 1816, Charles Cowden Clark, the BFF, the instigator, the bad influence, introduced our friend John to one of his own friends, Leigh Hunt. Leigh Hunt liked John from the beginning, and it went from Charles being the worst influence to Leigh being the worst influence. and he continuously encouraged John to pursue poetry and to hang out with Lee's circle of poet friends, who also encouraged John to pursue poetry. What did our boy John do? He listened. A couple months later, he had a conversation with his guardian. He kindly informed Richard that he didn't really want to pursue being a surgeon and was going to drop out of school and just be a poet. Richard, although generally disliking the Keats children, but pretty obviously wanted them to be successful, was less than pleased because he thoroughly believed that being a poet would not get John a lot of money and he would have a pretty bad life because of it. John felt he had a choice to pursue surgery or to pursue poetry. And this decision, this was a huge decision for him. And he was written to have been depressed over it because he really wanted to be a poet, but his family wasn't in the best of financial situations, and becoming a surgeon would partially ensure that he would have money coming in. His family knew about his ambitions to become a poet. His brother George once wrote that John feared he would never become a poet, and if he didn't, he would destroy himself. Even during all of this, the bad influence Leigh Hunt published one of John's poems in his magazine. When he saw it, somewhere else, real for the first time, it was sort of something went on in his head, and he realized this is something I could actually do. This isn't just something crazy that I want to do. Everything I've said is very, very vague, and I didn't go into his poetry, and I didn't go into as much depth as I could, because what would be the point of an educational video if I didn't leave you wanting to go read this stuff for yourself? So go forth, learn, read, shoot, and above all, DFTBA.